In San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, President Trump announces a deal to reopen the government for 3 weeks, ending a 35-day shutdown without the border wall money he had demanded. We've got all the details. Plus, in a stunning reversal, Facebook plans to merge WhatsApp, Instagram, and Facebook Messenger. But could the move unsettle wary users and perhaps even backfire with regulators? And YouTube is taking action to make conspiracy theory videos harder to find. We'll take a closer look at new policies to fight misinformation. First, to our top story, the Senate has passed the stopgap funding bill to temporarily end the government shutdown. Speaking from the White House, President Trump announced the 3-week temporary stopgap bill, ending the shutdown without the border wall money he had demanded. Take a listen.
I will sign a bill to open our government for 3 weeks until February 15th. I will make sure that all employees receive their back pay very quickly or as soon as possible. It'll happen fast.
This would mark the end of the longest shutdown in modern U.S. history, which has had far-reaching impacts from air travel to IPO plans and even tax refunds. Eric Wasson is our lead shutdown reporter, joins us now from Capitol Hill. So we're waiting for the House to vote on this, but they are expected to pass it, Eric, unanimously. What is the very latest? Set the scene for us.
Well, I mean, this is going to come as a great relief to federal workers. This 3-week stopgap bill will allow the House and Senate to talk about Homeland Security, about border security. Until February 15th, they're going to convene a formal conference committee. That's the way things are normally done around here. The House and Senate will sit down behind closed doors, members of the Appropriations Committee, and talk about how do we address Trump's concerns about border security while also respecting Democrats' concerns that a concrete wall is not the thing to do here. Ultimately, I think most of us believe that they'll come out with a plan that includes some new fencing. Trump will probably call that a wall. Democrats will call it a fence, and both sides will call it a day. I think for Democrats, they're very relieved that the government will be open before they start shutdown talks. They're worried about setting a precedent in which Trump would once again cause a shutdown in the fall or use the debt limit in order to get concessions, and they're just feeling this is the best way to move forward.
On that issue of the wall or fence and the technology behind it, here's a little bit more of what the president had to say.
They are smart walls designed to meet the needs of frontline border agents and are operationally effective. These barriers are made of steel, have see-through visibility, which is very important, and are equipped with sensors, monitors, and cutting-edge technology, including state-of-the-art drones.
That said, Eric, are the Democrats any more receptive to this idea, whether the wall is smart or not?
Well, this is exactly what Democrats have been saying all along. In fact, Trump is sounding very much like a Democrat. They have said that they are for drones, for technologies. They've talked about blimps even, these aerostats, for expanding ports of entry to allow there to be less of a backup, to allow each customs officer to really scan for drugs, improving imaging technology. And basically their message has been, let's go and get the evidence from the Homeland Security officials and find out what they actually need. You know, there may be places where barriers work. They just did not like the idea of a huge edifice that would somehow just really say, you know, we don't like Mexico. This is a symbol of racism in the view of many Democrats, and they'll go along with border security. There's a lot of hope here that they can, in fact, do that this talk of another shutdown in 3 weeks won't materialize. But then again, the president has been unpredictable, and we'll see what happens.
So let's talk about the next 24 to 48 hours. How does the government actually get back online?
Well, as soon as the president signs the bill, which will happen later today, the Office of Management Budget will issue a memo saying that all the agencies need to have their restart procedures. In fact, the White House has already issued a memo to all the agencies saying start to prepare to receive this memo. Once that memo goes into place, shift workers will be called back, those who have been furloughed. We're also making inquiries as to when exactly workers will be paid. In the past, workers have not gotten their back pay until the next pay period. That would be in another 2 weeks in most cases. But the legislation legislation that Trump already signed this month about providing back pays as soon as possible. So we're expecting that it will be quicker than 2 weeks before most of these 800,000 federal workers see their next paycheck.
Well, it sounds like they can count on at least 3 weeks of pay, but what if we're back in this very same situation in 3 weeks? Who has the upper hand in Congress?
Well, I think Democrats clearly do. Trump, having not been able to successfully get the wall during a shutdown the first time, is unlikely to do it again. I think everyone most people in the Senate Republican caucus are really against the shutdown. They weren't for it in the beginning, and they really were giving Vice President Mike Pence a lot of grief yesterday when he came up here to Capitol Hill. And in the House Republican caucus, the Freedom Caucus, which really advocated a shutdown tactic, has been sort of isolated. And again, they don't have the power they did when they were in the majority. So you've got really a Democratic upper hand here. But again, Nancy Pelosi was not gloating. She knows that it could turn very much around if she did try to do a victory lap here and went overboard. So she's trying to be very measured and say, let's come to a border security agreement. Let's be reasonable. And I think that bodes well for an agreement.
Still, certainly a victory for the Democrats and anyone getting a government paycheck. Okay, Bloomberg's Eric Wasson continuing to cover the shutdown for us in Washington. We've been following the impact of this shutdown on tech businesses, on the U.S. IPO market. Uber and Lyft, of course, have filed to go public this year. Slack and Airbnb could follow. But the shutdown has put some go public plans on hold. So what happens now? And if the government shuts down again in February? To answer all these questions, I want to bring in Barrett Daniels, partner at Deloitte, where he focuses on national IPO services. So I assume the government reopening is good news for the IPO market, right?
It is. I mean, I wasn't hugely concerned anyway, especially as it relates to the tech IPO market. These companies like to generally have a full year of financial statements when they go on the road. So they were mostly looking probably March, April. A lot that I currently know are talking about the summer, and it would have had almost no impact. That said, this is better than the alternative, no doubt about it.
So what happens if in 3 weeks the government is shut down again? Then we get closer to that March, April timeframe that, Uber and Lyft have been reportedly looking at.
True, but this brief period should still allow for the SEC to catch up and kind of get things back on track, and which is going to be a big piece of the puzzle. So IPO timelines are always complicated. I've been doing this exclusively for 15 years. I've yet to see one hit its original timeline. They're filled with curveballs, and this is just another one. So at the end of the day, I'm still confident that things can snap back into its regular cadence here pretty quickly.
But what's happening behind the scenes? I mean, are business executives nervous or jittery about what's happening in Washington?
I'm definitely getting questions about it, but our message is it doesn't matter, right? It's noise. We have to be prepared one way or the other. You can't snap your fingers and make this happen tomorrow anyway. It takes 6 months to a year anyway. So the companies that we're currently working with that are talking about later in the year, it's just stay focused on what you can do.
How concerned are they about broader market volatility? Because there's been a lot of tech volatility going into this, and then the shutdown, and who knows what happens in 3 weeks.
Absolutely. Volatility is the enemy of the IPO. It has calmed down here a little bit recently, but certainly that was some of the concern towards the end of last year. And if it does tick back up, it will absolutely make some of these companies take a second look and say, is this the right path? That said, that more relates to your typical unicorns. These monsters, the decacorns, they go whenever they want, right? Volatility, it's not meaningless, but not really that big of a deal.
So you think companies like Uber or Lyft could go whenever they want, based on their valuations and the consumer understanding of what those companies do?
Yeah, I mean, look, these high-profile, super exciting decacorns that everybody knows and loves and uses, yes, they can pretty much write their ticket.
Now, you've said you've been optimistic that this would be a historic year for IPOs. Are you still optimistic?
I am. I mean, just to put it into context, I mean, there's only been like 4 decacorn IPOs ever, never more than 1 in a year. And
by decacorn, you mean more than $10 billion?
Yes, right. The private company is worth $10 billion. And there could be 4, 5, 6 this year. I mean, we're literally talking about a year like nothing we've ever seen before.
So what could impede those plans?
Okay, so the volatility we talked about, it's not great, right? And the longer things sort of go, uncertainty always is a question when you're talking about IPOs. And also, there's still an abundance of capital capital in the private markets. These companies don't have to go. There's nothing that's requiring them to get out. The pressures in a traditional IPO was that next significant capital raise that you needed in order to get to that next phase in your company's life. But there's so much money now that the capital raising component of the IPO just isn't what it used to be.
So assuming these companies do go public as you expect them to, will they be successful offerings?
So I think in order to be a successful IPO, if you have this great brand recognition, if you have significant revenue growth, I often say revenue growth is the elixir of Wall Street, right? Always has been, probably always will be.
Not profit.
Definitely not. No, really. I mean, path to profit is, when times get a little tight, I start to hear that more, but I haven't heard much of that here in the last couple of years. So these companies that do have these key factors and a good story to tell, that's usually a pretty good recipe for a successful IPO.
What about next year?
So I'm hearing a lot of companies that were originally talking about 2020 and even 2021 saying maybe 2019 is the better time for us. But that's
why?
It just feels like the appetite from the IPO investment community is very strong at the moment.
Or maybe the devil you know is better than the devil you don't, right? Who knows what's going to happen in 2020?
Completely agree. And so the longer you look out, the harder it is to gauge. But it feels like the IPO window is still open and will be for the next few months at least.
All right, Barrett Daniels, partner at Deloitte. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate those insights. We'll see if you're right. Thank you. Now to a story we are watching. Google lost Walmart as a flagship partner for its shopping actions platform. The retailer also recently dropped out of Google Express delivery service. This could be a bit of a blow to Google's plan to challenge Amazon, though Walmart said it remains committed to their strategic partnership. Coming up, when three apps become one, we talk about Mark Zuckerberg's plan to bring Instagram, WhatsApp, and Facebook Messenger under one roof. That is next. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. Listen on the Bloomberg app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. One chat app to rule them all. That could be what Mark Zuckerberg is getting at after the news broke that Facebook is looking to merge the chat tools for Instagram, WhatsApp, and Messenger into one. Remember that when Facebook acquired Instagram and WhatsApp, the plan was for them to run as separate entities. So what's changed? Well, according to a Facebook statement, the following. People want messaging to be fast, simple, reliable, and private. We're working on making more of our messaging products end-to-end encrypted and considering ways to make it easier to reach friends and family across networks. As you would expect, there's a lot of discussion and debate as we begin the long process of figuring out all the details of how this will work. For more, I want to bring in Bloomberg Tech Sarah Fryer, who covers Facebook, and with us by phone, Brigitte Majewski, a VP and Research Director at Forrester. So, Sarah, this is just the chat part of these apps. But that said, it is a stark reversal to what Mark Zuckerberg has said all along, that these were going to be separate and independent companies. Why is he doing this?
There are a few reasons why. Well, first, let's be clear. There's not a separate one chat app that's going to come out of this. They're just integrating them on the back end, behind the scenes, so that all of the apps can share data and information between them, making it easier for users to switch.
So how is it actually going to change my user experience?
As a user, you might not actually see much of a change, except for you might be able to message someone on WhatsApp about a Facebook Marketplace post and vice versa. What is really interesting here is Facebook is going to have to, through this process, understand who their users are on these platforms that don't have as stringent rules around real identity as Facebook does. On Instagram, you can have multiple accounts, many of them anonymous. On WhatsApp, all you need is a phone number. What this will do for Facebook is it will break down some of that confusion about who's who and make it clear to the company and therefore to its advertisers who exactly they're targeting across these services.
Right, and of course on Facebook Messenger, you're required to use your real name. Brigitte, users aren't exactly angling for Facebook to become more integrated, and in fact, many users like that Instagram and WhatsApp are separate from Facebook. What do you make of this move?
You're exactly right, Emily. They have appreciated the separateness for a while, and I think that Sarah hit the nail on the head. What this is going to do is give Facebook that 360 view into its consumers, meaning a deeper understanding and even better targeting that it can relay back to its advertisers. At the end of the day, we all know Facebook doesn't do much just to be a nice entity. It's doing it for financial gain. And what this does is improve its advertising. Eventually, Facebook is going to hit a wall, and already has with the Facebook.com in terms of inventory, right? Its only place to go is not more advertising, but better advertising. And this is how it's going to do it, by giving their advertisers a better view of those consumers through its 360 understanding of what these folks are doing across all the different apps.
Is there any indication of what employees, Sarah, think about this? We know that the founders of WhatsApp, the founders of Instagram have left. They were not happy when they left, and obviously that makes it easier for Mark Zuckerberg to do this. But internally, do employees like this idea?
Well, there has been a lot of tension at the Instagram organization and the WhatsApp organization about this idea of integrating more deeply in, and there are some very clear reasons why. Because on Instagram, if you have a user that has an anonymous account because they're trying to explore some part of their identity that they'd like to keep anonymous, imagine that account being shared with their parents on Facebook, the main social network, maybe outing them as gay or outing them as something that they don't want their parents to necessarily know at that moment. There's some real privacy concerns to opening up this kind of data sharing between the apps. At the same time, let's not kid ourselves, Facebook owns these properties anyway, and these properties are sharing data back with Facebook, so this makes it smoother for the company to understand how big its audience is, and furthermore, understand the future of its business. Facebook, for the first time in the prior quarter, announced that 2.5 billion people around the world use what is called the family of apps. That's a term that Zuckerberg started using to try to explain what he's envisioning here.
Now, Brigitte, is it a good idea for Facebook to be doing this as they face concerns about data privacy and as regulators are looking at whether to break Facebook up?
Right. It's a real pro-con situation. On one hand, they're saying that now all messages will be encrypted, which is great, but we all know the downside of that is that it's going to make it harder to track bad actors who are using the messaging apps to propagate false information and fake news. So it's a real give and take. We definitely predict that there's going to be regulatory activity around Facebook. We think they're getting tied up in politics kind of put the writing on the wall for them. It's going to happen eventually. We're already seeing fines happening to Google and Facebook in other areas. We think it's going to happen, and it'll happen really soon.
Now, Sarah, I want to get your thoughts on Mark Zuckerberg's op-ed, which came out about the same time. So the New York Times broke this story about Facebook planning to merge these apps. Zuckerberg, in this op-ed, talking about privacy, but also trying to explain very basic parts of the business model. It was just interesting for a company that's been around for 15 years. He still has to explain these things.
Well, Facebook wants to set the terms of this conversation. And in these op-eds and in their congressional testimony, you see them over and over again repeat the line, "We don't sell your data to advertisers." What that does is that diverts the conversation from the data that Facebook's collecting and into the data that Facebook is sharing. Facebook does not want to share your data with other people. They want to keep it in an entity that they can charge advertisers for access to. So really, in this conversation about these apps, combining them behind the scenes, that's more about the information that users are sharing with Facebook. How much does Facebook collect about us? How much do they know that we don't necessarily know that they know or that we want them to know? And I think that's a much more dangerous conversation for Facebook to have in a regulatory environment. So the more they can come out and say, this is about us not sharing data with other people, the more they divert it from that real threat.
In the op-ed, Zuckerberg says we need to be clear about the ways we're using information, and people need to have clear choices about how their information is used. We believe regulation that codifies these principles across the internet would be good for everyone. That said, Brigitte, he, in this op-ed, tries to explain Facebook's business model, and again, at times, it sounds confusing. Do you think he really succeeded at what he was trying to do?
I think he's playing with the word sell a bit. Technically, do they sell data? Probably not. But do they monetize data? They certainly do. And do they monetize data without consumers possibly fully understanding how they do that? Yes, of course. Listening to those congressional hearings and listening Mark have to explain over and over how things work. When the leaders of the free world don't understand the business model and will debate, are you selling, are you not, are you monetizing, are you not, it makes you wonder exactly what's going on.
Speaking of that, a great piece by the Center for Investigative Reporting today about how Facebook reportedly intentionally monetized or took money from children from their parents' credit cards that they didn't know they were spending. Check that one out online. Bloomberg's Sarah Fryer, Forrester's Brigitte Majewski, thank you both. Coming up, Starbucks is doubling down on its digital strategy. We're going to hear from CEO Kevin Johnson about how they intend to keep users coming back for coffee on the app. This is Bloomberg. Starbucks has put its recent sales slump behind it, beating analyst estimates in key regions in its first quarter, including the U.S. and Asia. And the coffee chain has high hopes for its digital strategy. CEO Kevin Johnson joined us earlier on Bloomberg Television.
Well, digital is a key part of our strategy. We've worked to extend the in-store experience to a digital mobile relationship with our customers. And, digital is a journey because technology is always changing. The way consumers use technology continues to evolve. And so we continue to adapt with that. So for example, we launched our mobile app. We now have in the U.S. 16.3 million active rewards members.
Chinese telecom Huawei has been dealt another blow. This one comes from Vodafone, one of the world's largest mobile carriers. Vodafone says it will pause buying Huawei equipment for its European networks while it talks with the company and various governments. The U.S. has been pushing allies to block Huawei from 5G networks amidst fears that China could use the equipment for espionage. Coming up, it is no secret that Silicon Valley leans toward the Democratic Party, also known Big Tech's dislike of taxes. Could the two come into conflict in the next presidential election? That's next. This is Bloomberg. Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. In opposition to Donald Trump, the Democratic Party is increasingly veering left. Earlier this week, U.S. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez proposed a 70% tax on incomes over $10 million. Meantime, presidential hopeful Senator Elizabeth Warren proposed her own wealth tax on those with $50 million in assets. And while Silicon Valley notoriously leans left, could such tax agendas impact their liberal loyalties? Joining from Washington, we've got Bloomberg's Laura Davidson, and here in San Francisco, our own Eric Newcomer. So, Eric, it's no secret that Silicon Valley favors the Democratic Party, but how much will Silicon Valley like a more leftist Democratic Party?
Yeah, I think that's sort of the question right now. Behind closed doors, you definitely hear a lot of sort of venture capitalists asking whether, taxes and wealth redistribution should really be the focus of the Democratic message. On the other hand, Chris Sacca, an early Uber investor who's made a fortune off that bet, tweeted out in support of Elizabeth Warren's wealth tax proposal, saying that, it depended on how it was executed, but he's open to it. So I think we're going to see a lot of sort of some set that's more open to taxing their own wealth and others that would like the message to focus on something else.
Now, Jeff Bezos would owe $4.1 billion in the first year if Elizabeth Warren's wealth tax was passed. Laura, what's the difference between that and what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is proposing?
Yeah, so the wealth tax, Elizabeth Warren's tax, is actually a lot bigger and a lot more widespread in a sense than the AOC, the 70% tax that's out there. So what that would do is basically every year tax anyone who is worth $50 million or more. So you pay that 2% tax. If you're a billionaire like Jeff Bezos, that rate on all your worth above $1 billion goes to 3%. This 70% tax really affects a narrower group of people because people who are earning that $10 million, typically it's coming in the form of capital gains or things that don't pay kind of what we call ordinary tax rates. So, and you look at how much money these would raise. This plan by Elizabeth Warren would raise almost $3 trillion, just a little bit under that. And the Ocasio-Cortez plan, only a couple $100 billion. So you look, it's a big difference in terms of if Democrats want to redistribute wealth. Something like what Elizabeth Warren has done is much more effective than the 70% top tax rate.
Now, I interviewed Priscilla Chan yesterday, Mark Zuckerberg's wife, founder of the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, about a big new housing initiative that they're backing, Facebook's backing, Genentech is backing to tackle the housing crisis. And I thought it was a good example of the leftist sort of heart of Silicon Valley. Take a listen to what she had to say.
This is a problem that exists that impacts the greater community, and they want to be able to be part of building the Seattle or the Bay Area into this place that people from all different backgrounds can come and be successful. And it's also understanding that looking at opportunities like the partnership where they can be part of being a durable solution.
So there she's talking about why tech companies are becoming more supportive of some of these housing issues. That said, Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, has been out there over and over again talking about how tech companies, tech CEOs aren't doing enough. Take a listen to what he had to say recently.
The amazing thing is these companies can afford it. For us, it's just a $10 million tax. These are immaterial amounts to us. The $10 million doesn't mean anything. That's less than the private plane that Jack Dorsey is going to fly around on. You know that. And I'll tell you right now, it's the money that we need to make a difference here in San Francisco.
He got personal there. Jack Dorsey was one of the people who didn't support this new business tax that actually did pass, Prop C. But it begs the question, how left is Silicon Valley really?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Priscilla Chan point is really interesting because I think the debate here is going to be what's the best way to help people? Is it to have sort of billionaires with their fortune committing to giving a lot of it away to the causes that they see as really valuable, or is it better to flow some of that money to the government and then have the government decide, okay, this is how we're going to allocate it? And it's really going to be a debate about the best way to sort of take on these big projects and where sort of philanthropy and sort of helping people is best originated. Is it from sort of the wealthy who have earned their money, or is it from the government that's going to allocate it out itself?
Now, Laura, are these big tax ideas truly part of the new Democratic platform, or is Elizabeth Warren out on a limb?
She's pretty far to the left for the party, but you can bet that some sort of big tax increase, some sort of tax, whether it be on corporations or whether it be on wealthy individuals, those are two big pots of money out there. Democratic tax plans are going to include that. They have some really ambitious goals that they want to do, whether it's Medicare for all, something with housing, free college tuition. Well, there's a whole really ambitious agenda that costs a lot of money, a lot more money than our current system can really produce. So you're going to see a lot of new ideas, and really they're going to be messaging things, that are going to really appeal to a populist base. These are the things that have sort of been popular with voters. You look at the 70% tax rate that was proposed, and that was, you had a majority of people supporting that. So they're looking at the numbers. They're looking at, how can we get voters excited if a Democrat wins and gets to Washington. You can bet that those proposals will be tamed back, particularly because they'll be constrained by Congress, which will have some balance of power between Democrats and Republicans.
Now, our producer Devin put together this great chart showing the big tax breaks that various companies have gotten for certain projects. So $1.3 billion tax break to Tesla for its Gigafactory in Nevada. Apple, a $214 million tax break for a data center in Iowa. It goes on. Foxconn, Amazon, $2.5 billion tax break for HQ2. I mean, there's a difference, Laura, between corporations and individuals. Do you see the individuals being more open to paying more taxes than the corporations, or what?
Well, I don't think anyone's really excited about getting taxed higher. Though, however, when you look at, a corporate, in Washington here, corporations are very well connected and lobby very effectively. You just saw they got their tax rate cut down from 35% to 21%. That was huge. Democrats, you see wanting to creep that up a little bit. Maybe somewhere if they had their way, mid to high 20s. But that's going to be tricky again to get that through Congress. And the thing is, wealthy individuals also have lobbyists. They have groups. They are organized, but it's just such a small percent of the population on whole. So what you hear in terms of, kind of outrage, public outrage, this Elizabeth Warren tax only affects 75,000 families. So it's relatively small when you look at a whole voter base. However, that's also in many cases your donor class. So you have to weigh all these things if you're a candidate trying to put this together of how do you keep some of the people happy some of the time.
Eric, it'll be interesting to see who Silicon Valley throws their weight behind.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think there'll be the true believers, people who sort of hear a message that resonates with them. And, Cory Booker, there are candidates already that have relationships in Silicon Valley. And so
Cory Booker has a relationship with Mark Zuckerberg.
Right. I think it'll be fascinating to watch. We're so early in the cycle now. It's amazing to me, we're talking about these taxes already, and it's so early. So there's plenty of time for sort of the message to build and to see whether other Democrats sort of embrace a left tax policy or try to sort of appease donors like they traditionally have.
All right. Bloomberg's Eric Newcomer and Laura Davison, thank you both. Well, Intel shares fell the most in 6 months Friday after the company issued a weak 2019 forecast in its latest earnings report. The lackluster outlook marked a change from recent quarters when Intel posted robust growth in its data center unit. Interim CEO Bob Swan spoke to Bloomberg about the outlook for the company's cloud business.
First, I'd start with saying we're extremely excited by the end demand, the workloads, the consumer consumption of things that are driving the use of data continues to grow and be extremely strong. So we feel very good about our position in the market and the long-term trends. Coming off of a record 2018 where our cloud business grew by 40% during the course of the year, what we see is a buildup of inventory in our customers. And what normally happens is they build the inventory, then they put it to use and consume it for a while, and then they come back and they build more. And the reason they're building more is because they see the workloads and the end demand to continue to be extremely strong. So what's going on right now is they're in the consumption digestion mode, and our expectations, given the end markets are strong, is they'll be back in the second half of the year buying like they have been over the last several years. So we're very bullish on the long term, and we're going through a natural digestion after a fantastic 2018 cloud performance for us.
So this isn't the cycle rolling over. This isn't a sort of end demand story from the cloud computing sector beginning to turn.
No, we think the demand for data, which is driving the ultimate demand for servers and storage, continues to grow and be extremely healthy. And this is just the normal cycle that we've seen over the last several years in terms of how they consume and then digest and then consume again. But the end markets are very exciting, and the products that we have coming out during the course of 2019 are very exciting as well.
Bob, you have some formidable competitors like NVIDIA, AMD. Xilinx reported some good earnings this week. What are you doing to differentiate yourself and tell the Intel growth market share story?
Well, first and foremost, it starts with the size of the market. And when we look at the overall TAM, if you will, for silicon, it's a $300 billion market, and we're a very large player with roughly 25% share. So we see significant opportunities to grow. And when we look at the key requirements to position yourself for growth, we really see 6 things from a technology standpoint: process manufacturing, architecture, memory, interconnect, software, and security. When we talk to our end customers, those are the 6 things that are increasingly important for them to solve the growing demands in the end market. we have all of those capabilities, and we've been investing in those capabilities for a while, so we can stitch together the technologies required, not to have one product, but to stitch together the technologies that are solving our customers' problems. And we think we have the broadest, most diverse, and best set of products that exists in the industry.
Intel interim CEO there, Bob Swan. Coming up, we discuss the continued challenge for traditional department stores, how one brick-and-mortar business is pushing into tech to succeed. That is next. This is Bloomberg. It's been a tough start to the year for U.S. retailers. The S&P 500 Supercomposite Department Store Index has fallen after Macy's, Nordstrom, and a number of other retailers posted weak holiday sales. That's revived talk of how viable department stores are as customers change the way they shop. Still, there are entrepreneurs trying to breathe new life into the concept with technology. As part of our Retail Transformed series, Bloomberg Emma Chandra spoke with co-founder and CEO of Neighborhood Goods, which is trying to revamp the traditional department store.
We're not operating on a wholesale basis. Brands come in and they either pay us a fixed fee per month or a lesser fixed fee, and we take a percentage of sales. And so there's about 30 to 40 brands at our first location, and that will fluctuate. We've built a modular architectural system that allows for brands to quickly move and sort of resize their areas, re-merchandise, all sorts of different purposes and goals. And they'll be with us for anywhere from 2 months to 12 months. And hopefully, as we expand, move around that ecosystem with us as well. And so it's just a much different relationship. For them, it's ostensibly like opening a pop-up, except we're staffing it. We are sort of helping drive a huge amount of data and insight for them as to how they're performing and where the opportunities reside around the business.
Technology is a huge part of what you can offer these brands as well in the store. There's an app that allows customers to navigate the store better. You're also using cameras in a different way to perhaps sort of direct customers to products that they may or may not like. Tell us a little bit about how you're leveraging technology.
Yeah, so we have about 30 cameras in the room, and what that's doing is it's not capturing any personally identifiable data, but rather capturing broad demographics and traffic figures and general behavioral insights. So for us, that means that we can filter through e-commerce level analytics and data to brands that are accustomed to running their businesses off those sorts of figures. And so they can look at what particular areas are underperforming. They can look at particular product types that could be optimized. They can look at categories that might be missing. They might have an initial assumption that their audience is women in their 30s, and find that it's actually women in their 50s that are shopping, and they can quickly update and modify. And so it allows for a really sort of responsive and really relevant experience in the store for the consumer, as well as driving a huge amount of insight for the brands. In addition to that, to your point, we've launched Neighborhood Goods on the App Store. Allows for you to sort of interact with our store on your own terms.
On the data side of things that you were just mentioning, is that something that has really helped you sell Neighborhood Goods to these the brands that are coming into the store? Is that something that perhaps they weren't being offered anywhere else?
I think it's certainly been an element that's been popular, but it's certainly not the core of it. I think what brands got excited about was a very traditional idea of brand adjacency. So you think about traditional department stores. If you're a brand, you care almost as much about your sales as you do about where you're placed in the store and who you're next to, and how that might help elevate your brand. And that's an idea and a concept that's been fairly missing for most direct-to-consumer brands. They're all online. They're not really gathered anywhere.
This is something that sounds like it should be operating or should be happening in Soho in New York, but it's not. It's happening in Plano, Texas. Why there, and are you planning to expand?
Yeah, so Plano is the third fastest growing city in the country. It's a little bit unorthodox and unexpected, but it's an audience that has a huge amount of demand and appetite for these sorts of products and brands. And so what we see in general is the Dallas-Fort Worth area as a whole tends to be in the top 5 markets, or at worst top 10 for most of these brands. Plano is a big concentration of that capital and those transactions. And so you look at a market like that, and there's sort of this missed opportunity for them where brands haven't got a physical presence there. Some do that are a little bit more advanced, but there's this area full of customers that care about them,
and they just can't access it.
Right. And so Plano's been exciting to us, and we're looking at markets like that around the country, all sorts of different cities and areas and their respective satellites. So anything from Chicago to Seattle, Atlanta, DC, Boston, Philadelphia, Santa Monica, all over the place.
Now, in all these places, we're hearing a lot about store closures. What kind of locations would you be moving into if you actually do open in these cities?
Well, the funny thing is we're actually looking at a lot of old department store spaces. You know, our space in Plano is 14,000 square feet, and I think we're aiming to have that size or larger for the next few. And so it's relatively difficult to find something that size in a lot of developments.
Now, what about your investors? You are backed by Forerunner Ventures. They often focus on the digitally native brands that are now in neighborhood goods. How did you pitch them a physical store?
Yeah, so Kirsten Green at Forerunner was one of the first people that my business partner, Mark Macinta, and I spoke to. And I think what we were very fortunate to discover with Kirsten and with lots of others in the space was that there's a general appetite for a new type of retail experience. They're seeing a lot of their portfolio companies across a lot of different consumer venture funds that their customer acquisition costs are rising for a lot of these brands, and lifetime customer value is dropping. And physical retail is seen as a solution to that, insofar as
it's a long time since physical retail was seen as a solution.
Right, but it allows for, you know, you can sort of stumble into something and discover it on a much more organic basis. And then for a loyalty perspective, you can sort of come back, you can see it evolve, you see it all the time, and there's something very subtle there that's very useful for these sorts of brands.
Matt Alexander there, Neighborhood Goods CEO, along with Bloomberg's Emma Chandra. Still ahead, YouTube is attempting to stop the spread of misinformation across its platform. Which videos it's targeting next. This is Bloomberg. YouTube is making changes to its recommendation algorithm. In a test limited to the United States, the company said it would stop recommending what it calls borderline content, videos that include misinformation and conspiracy theories. The company said the change would impact less than 1% of videos available on the site. For more, I want to bring in Bloomberg's Mark Bergen, who of course covers YouTube for us. Well, they say it makes up less than 1% of the videos, but it gets like 80% of the attention. What kind of borderline videos are we talking about here?
Right. So Google, in their blog post this morning, they gave us 3 examples. There was one, they said videos that promise cures for fake cures for serious illnesses. The other was flat Earth, which is a conspiracy theory that has taken on remarkably kind of reached pop culture level, where you have like NBA stars and rap stars dropping the fact that they believe in the flat Earth.
This is a fascinating one. I mean, there are innumerable videos on YouTube about claiming that the Earth is flat.
Right. I think a lot of people will say who worked at the company, this isn't a new problem. They've had this for years. The third example is 9/11 conspiracy videos, and those have been for almost as long as YouTube's been around. I think what's happening that's new are 2 things. One, we're in this new climate where there's a lot of attention on both sides of the political aisle around tech. And Google has changed their recommendation algorithm in recent years, and they're starting to prioritize things like they want YouTube videos to be watched longer. And they know that they keep people on the site, they keep people watching more videos if while they're watching one video, they serve up another. And the problem they've had is that you kind of have this, like what's been deemed like the YouTube rabbit hole, where people will watch a certain video, they'll recommend another, and they'll quickly go from something that's very slippery with the facts to something a flat out lie and misinformation, a conspiracy theory. And YouTube's been very reluctant to remove those from the sites because they don't violate their policies. So now they've invented this new category called borderline videos that are not removed. They don't violate the policies, but they promise they're going to try to remove them from recommendations.
Now, in the past, there's been, some justification for leaving these videos on, like the flat Earth videos. Who's that really hurting? But some of these other videos, like conspiracy theories about 9/11, why would YouTube ever leave those on the site?
And you saw that with Congress right before Sundar Pichai, the CEO, went before Congress. There was a conspiracy theory about Hillary Clinton that gained a lot of momentum on YouTube, and one recent about Justice Ginsburg. YouTube has historically been, this is a free platform. You know, if you remember, years ago they stood up and kept the video, very controversial video about Islam. There have been people at the company that are sort of believe in free speech, and they're also very concerned about, well, where do we draw the line? Right? If you take down certain videos, if you bend our policy around which videos violate that aren't explicitly hate speech, for instance, then, you know, is a Bigfoot video conspiracy theory? Is a parody video conspiracy theory? And YouTube is always balancing this sort of negative press they get and attention from the fact that one of their biggest constituents are the creators who produce YouTube videos, who are already mad at them because their ad money have gone down. So I think that's where the company really sees itself in that tension, and they're kind of taking very slow steps.
If it's only 1% of the content, as they say, will this impact use significantly?
You know, it's unclear. One example I've heard is that people that use YouTube a lot are people that find these videos attractive. But it's 1% in YouTube world is still a lot of videos.
A lot of people. All right, Mark Bergen, who covers YouTube for us, thank you so much. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Tech earnings will be in full swing next week. Stay tuned to Bloomberg Tech for full coverage and analysis. We'll have Apple, Facebook, Amazon, all as they report their results. Of course, we're live streaming on Twitter. You can check us out at Technology and follow our Global Breaking News Network TikTok on Twitter. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Happy Friday. We'll see you next week.